interesting because this is something completely different than what we just saw in the last game.
Yeah, I mean, Andy is one of those players who's been around for a good number of years as well. I remember playing him in tournaments many, many years back now, so no stranger to top-level competition for an extended period of time. His team is going to comprise of Rayquaza, Crobat, one of my favorites, but I'll touch on that later, Incineroar, the Tapu Koko, Kyogre, and Clefairy. Not usually the biggest Pokemon, but when it turns up, it does a lot of work. That is going to be facing off against Yusei's team of the Xerneas, the Torn Wings Necrozma, another Crobat. I am truly blessed in this game. Of course, Metagross, Incineroar, and Amoonguss rounding out that team. So many things to touch on. Obviously, the time is already ticking down for these players. Of course, we've got two Crobats. That's going to be an interesting battle as well. Clefairy versus Metagross is a little bit different on each team. The restricted pairings are wildly different. Ooh, there's a lot going on in this one.
There's a lot going on, and I think the juxtaposition of the Xerneas with the Dawnwings Necrozma is something that we have yet to feature on stream. Dawnwings Necrozma, I feel like, is certainly an interesting pick. I think a lot of people, prior to this tournament, were focusing a little bit more on Lunala in its sort of base unfused form. Just because it does have access to that Menacing Moonraze Maelstrom, one of the best Z moves in the format. But, certainly Necrozma can do that as well. It really depends on what kind of, Necrozma that Yusei has brought to support his Xerneas. Looking at how that's going to play out. Yes, Andy has that popular combination of Kyogre and Rayquaza, but, looking at the Pokemon on his team, I don't see any obvious call-outs for, oh, this is the Pokemon that you bring in to, stop that Xerneas. And Crobat certainly has a lot of utility that will help it out, but, face down with a lead such as what we're seeing, play out now, I don't know if it's going to have an opportunity to really do what it needs to do.
Yeah, well, these teams are, carrying some interesting stuff. The leads have taken the field, though. Tapu Koko and Crobat, probably one of the fastest leads in the game right now from Andy Hines. And Yusei Matsuno bringing something a little slower, really bring that game down to his tempo. Amoonguss and Metagross.
Yeah, and it's certainly a really different way to start from both these trainers. Crobat does have the opportunity here to go for something like Tailwind if Andy decides he needs even more speed on top of the natural speed that this Tapu Koko and Crobat bring to the field already. He could go for something really powerful and just try and knock out that Metagross before, it's able to, start dealing damage to his own Pokemon. One thing that I think is really interesting is the fact that this Metagross, it will Mega Evolve. It's not intimidated. It gets the Tough Claws ability, which will increase its attacking power, and that could be very dangerous if Andy doesn't have anything in the back of the party that can really stop it.
Well, he's going to be able to look for something that can slow it down right now. With the Tapu Koko immediately switching out with Volt Switch. Good damage done, of course, in that electric terrain. Kyogre coming into the field, so could be an interesting choice right now. Of course, electric terrain's up, but there's nothing to take advantage of it on Yusei's side of the field. Primal Reversion going down immediately, and not a big problem there. And there's no Groudon on the other side. There's no Rayquaza on the other side either, so it's going to have complete control of the weather apart from his own adaptations there as well. Crobat does decide to Tailwind, so that Kyogre in a great position. We've seen it before, with some of these Lunala teams. If you can get it in, you're in big trouble. And the Metagross, revealing Thunder Punch, lands on the Crobat, so Kyogre, the bead of sweat dripping down immediately, is going to get there. And it's been all onto the Crobat right now with the Spore, making sure, of course, that electric terrain isn't causing any problems. Crobat is flying type, so now it's asleep with 1 health. Yusei, did struggle a little bit. Andy got a lot of what he wanted that turn, but at least Yusei got that Crobat completely useless. And I think it's interesting, he could just leave it there for a while.
He could, because Crobat was able to get Tailwind up, and in this situation, that's really all that Crobat can do. Tapu Koko was able to easily rotate out of the field and send in that Kyogre at full health with the rain under Tailwind. We know that Yusei doesn't have any Pokemon like the Groudon on his side of the field, so, assuming this Kyogre is suited for it, it could go for a Water Spout here and deal some really big damage. Unfortunately, that's going to be resisted by that Amoonguss, so it will be at least a 2-hit knockout, but it certainly is going to threaten down that Mega Metagross and, put it within KO range, if not actually knock it out.
Well, Metagross has got to do something. It does try and Bullet Punch what was a Crobat, now a Tapu Koko. That's going to take it pretty well, still above half, and Kyogre, completely unopposed now, is just starting to Water Spout. Metagross immediately immediately knocked out. Amoonguss obviously resisting it, taking that pretty well, but in a really good position. Amoonguss, though, retaliates right away with the Grass Knot. The Kyogre taking it very well indeed. Of course, it's Water Spout, not quite going to be there, but a good trade right there to make sure that the Metagross is removed from play. Something like this Tapu Koko is going to appreciate that.
And it's certainly great information for Andy moving forwards about that Amoonguss. I think a lot of trainers, in North America and in the European parts of the world have stopped running Grass Knot on their Amoonguss in favor of something like a Clear Smog to help your Xerneas matchup. But because Yusei has the Grass Knot, it did a nice chunk of damage to that Kyogre. It's going to weaken those Water Spouts and potentially weaken this Kyogre's damage output. Yes, Andy could double into this Xerneas in order to try and knock it out before it goes for something like a Geomancy, but the Amoonguss still has plenty of health, still has access to Rage Powder, and still can sort of protect its partner in that regard. And if Yusei's able to sort of stall out the remainder of Tailwind and find out a way to get Geomancy up on the field, he's going to be in a great spot.
Well, now we get to learn a little bit more about this Kyogre as well. Of course, Water Spout significantly weakened, and some players do just take 2 Water-type moves. If you Origin Pulse, you're going to be able to keep the pressure up on something like this Xerneas as well. We're really going to get to learn about Tapu Koko as well. We just saw it Volt Switch before, so we know one Electric-type move. Xerneas keeping itself safe right now, doesn't want to get caught by any nasty little tricks, as Tapu Koko shows off the Dazzling Gleam, taking advantage of that Fairy Aura. Of course, the Xerneas is set up. I don't think it's too relevant, but the Amoonguss does take a big hit. Kyogre Origin Pulsing immediately, so potentially no Ice Beam there, as that's usually the preferred choice when you go towards something like Amoonguss. And the Amoonguss is clinging on. It's just going to keep on Grass Knotting, though, making sure Water Spout is nigh on useless.
And making Kyogre easily in knockout range for the other Pokemon on Yusei's side of the field. I mean, even another Grass Knot would knock it out at this point in time. I think Andy's still in a great spot because he is going to move first. That Xerneas did just protect this turn on Yusei's side of the field, and we don't know what that last Pokemon is yet. So you would have to imagine that as this format kind of has dictated throughout the year, once you get rid of the Xerneas on your opponent's side of the field, you are going to have that much more of an advantage moving forwards in this game. And Yusei, if he wants the Xerneas for later, I think he's forced now to switch it out and reveal that last Pokemon. If he wants to try and keep it on the field this turn, he certainly could, but it's a very tall ask. There's only so much a Rage Powder can protect it at this point in time, knowing that Origin Pulse and another Dazzling Gleam are most likely going to be your opponent's moves of choice.
Xerneas forced out of the field. You called it. Not the time for it right now, and revealing his last Pokemon, Yusei will be bringing Incineroar. I'm going to be honest, Incineroar versus Kyogre is not usually the most favorable matchup, but if you can buy a little bit of time, that may be just enough. Amoonguss does start the turn out with a Protect, making sure that it's going to be able to buy some time. Get out of Tailwind as well. That's so important, and right away, this Tapu Koko giving up some information. It's been a couple years, I think, since I've seen Tapu Koko pull out the Z move, but it's back. Tapu Koko actually a Pokemon at this tournament that's picked up usage quite significantly, by far and above the most used of those Tapu variety Pokemon. And Gigavolt Havoc in electric terrain is not fun for anything to deal with. Incineroar's going to be the one on the receiving end of this one, brought down well under half, and all this Origin Pulse has to do is connect. That's pretty much going to be the key thing. There it is.
Yeah, that is unfortunately one knocked out Incineroar, but for its troubles, that Xerneas dodged the Gigavolt Havoc from that Tapu Koko, which, I mean, we don't know enough about this Tapu Koko to make too many assumptions, but I do know that it is possible, depending on what move you run it with, you can deal some really big damage onto opposing Xerneas and possibly even knock them out. I think it's safe to say that Andy was hoping slash, almost felt guaranteed that the combination of that Z move and the Origin Pulse from the Kyogre would have been a knockout onto that Xerneas. And unfortunately for him, yes, the Z move is gone, but Kyogre certainly can go for another Origin Pulse here. That Tapu Koko still has enough health to sort of put a dent in this Xerneas, and it might come down to just the combination of that Crobat and whatever his last Pokemon is to try and knock it out. Yusei, I think, is forced to just try and Geomancy this turn and hope that, enough Dazzling Gleams, once you have those special attack boosts, will deal big damage. But, again, this is really great information for him going into Game 2, especially knowing that it probably was the Thunder that based that Electrium Z attack, but not going to be enough for him to win this game.
That's a good little reveal right now. I think the big thing at this juncture, though, is, Yusei got out of the Tailwind, but he just wasn't in a good enough position to see it through. Of course, Xerneas' Geomancy is going to be an interesting option. You know, he has to go quicker. And the chances of Andy setting up another Tailwind certainly very slim. Of course, that Crobat on 1 health.
And asleep.
And asleep, yeah. So not going to be in a great position. Realistically, you know, the next turn, a Dazzling Gleam takes a double knockout. Fine. And the last Pokemon for Andy could be absolutely essential. I mean, we look down the team at what we've seen already. We've seen the Tapu Koko, we've seen the Kyogre. You know, we do, of course, know that Crobat is away and asleep right now. If it's Rayquaza, you know, do you have Extreme Speed available? Yes, you know, and then you can clean up that way. So we'll see exactly if Andy's still got it in the bag. That 4th Pokemon is going to be so essential at this juncture.
Yeah, and just another option to consider as we watch these players, you know, play pretty safely moving forwards. If this Tapu Koko, you know, if it were Incineroar in the back of Andy's party, you know, that could be another out, having access to Fake Out and allowing the partner to attack. I would just think that he'd almost have to switch out one of these 2 Pokemon if it were the Incineroar, so that that Pokemon would be available to deal that damage later. So again, just something to keep in mind as we you know, move forward throughout this game. I'd be very surprised if it was the Incineroar over that Rayquaza, but you know, you just have to wonder sometimes, you know?
Yeah, well, we'll see the Dazzling Gleam is going to get the knockout. Crobat and Tapu Koko and his original lead at the top of this game removed from play. That's going to force those last 2 to be revealed. Of course, Kyogre coming in alongside the mystery 4th Pokemon. Andy really got to be making sure that it's exactly what he needs in this instance. It is going to be Kyogre out first. He's really making us wait for this one.
I know, he's building up the anticipation quite nicely.
Yep, and there is the Rayquaza. It only realistically has one option right now, and that's going to be Extreme Speed. Of course, if it does try and go for a regular attack, something like a Dragon Ascent, something that isn't boosted in the priority bracket, it's just going to get caught with the Dazzling Gleam. So really tough, I think, right there for the Rayquaza. The Xerneas has taken a lot of damage, though. You can't ignore that. That Origin Pulse landing earlier, absolutely key.
And there's no Intimidate on the field for this Rayquaza as well. I do know a lot of trainers going into the North American International Championships were running very, you know, offensive items on their Rayquaza, like Life Orb or like Choice Band. Something like that might be ideal here just to sort of hopefully ensure that knockout on that Xerneas. But, you know, unfortunately for us, Andy's hesitation in revealing that Rayquaza, I think, is an indication that he might not be running something as offensive. And I think he might be nervous about how this damage calculation is going to play out. And just to go into a little bit more of the mechanic here, with this Mega Evolution on that Mega Rayquaza, you know, it is going to have a higher attack stat, but it will be taking away the rain from the Kyogre. So, I mean, not that the Kyogre was going to attack this turn anyways, one would think, but it's really going to come down to this Extreme Speed.
Yeah,
and unfortunately for us, we have to wait another turn to see how it plays out.
Yeah, Yusei just making us wait, making sure he's got that information that it's going to be Extreme Speed. I know in previous years, some people have trained their Xerneas to be surprisingly bulky and provide that shock factor. It's really going to come down to, can Extreme Speed knock it out? If not, a Dazzling Gleam will just retaliate immediately. Both trainers looking on pretty chill. We'll see exactly how it goes. Here's Extreme Speed from Rayquaza. It's not enough! And Dazzling Gleam, we said a while ago, maybe it's not going to be enough to sweep through. It's so close, but it's gone. The Kyogre and the Rayquaza fall down, and we do see the pure power of a Xerneas in any format coming through. Yusei Matsuno down to 1 versus 4, clutching it out against Andy Himes here in round number 3. So that's a whole lot.
It came down to the wire. And again, to see how those Pokemon interacted, you know, to see Andy's hesitation when going for that Rayquaza onto the field, you have to wonder if that's going to be an indication of how he adjusts going into this game too. You know, it felt like all the pieces on the board to try and make things work. It's just the damage output didn't quite get there for him in the end. I liked the Tailwind from the Crobat. I liked how he played that Tapu Koko, but Yusei just able to remain sort of one step ahead, you know, keeping that Xerneas safe, you know, using the Incineroar to sort of take that Z move for him and just, again, position himself into the perfect opportunity to get that Geomancy up. Saving the Geomancy for pretty late on in the game as well, which is something I think that really sort of throws trainers off guard when it comes to how you play a Xerneas. You really just expect, okay, I see the Xerneas, I see Fake Out, I see Rage Powder. You know, a lot of times you expect to see that really early on in the game, but I liked how Yusei waited. You know, I think that gave him that opportunity that he needed and really just, again, set him up for success.
I really love the interactions between these kind of teams, right? And this is something that when I've been team building and playing at home with some friends, that I love hyper-offensive teams. So on paper, Andy's team ticks all the boxes for me, right? You've got Rayquaza and Kyogre, two crazy offensive Pokemon. You've got Crobat, which its sole job is to set up a bit of speed control or neutralize something like a Taunt or a Haze and get off the field. And then, of course, Tapu Koko just dealing huge damage.
Thunder Z-move, which is just insane.
I mean, this matchup is ideal for Andy, right? He doesn't have to worry about the Groudon. He doesn't have to worry about the Rayquaza with those wins either. So this should be the ultimate kind of setup for him. But Yusei, even losing that Metagross early on, was able to weather that storm. I do think putting the Crobat to sleep was very, very good. It's always curious when you're the Crobat player, right? And a lot of people say, well, when you take Crobat, you've got to put down the Focus Sash on it, because then you get 2 turns, as we talked about before. But at the end of the day, once you've set up Tailwind, in some games, that's all you want to do.
Yep.
You want that removed from play, and we've looked at it in previous kind of formats, like the Kangaskhan Tornadoes team that was so popular at the North American International Championships, right? As soon as that Tornadoes has put down Tailwind, or just done a little bit of delaying your opponent, then you immediately want to switch it around and just deal with it that way. There are going to be some changes in this one. The Crobat actually coming out from Yusei Matsuno this time, along with his Dawn Wings and Necrozma there. And that's going to be facing off against the Kyogre and the Tapu Koko of Andy Himes. I do, of course, really enjoy to see exactly how much damage Tapu Koko can do when it's in a position like that.
It's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, to be blunt, it has the rain on the field, doesn't have to worry about Thunder's accuracy, has access to that Z move. But you have to sort of wonder which Pokemon that Andy's going to want to target down here. As we were just talking about, the Crobat probably has access to Tailwind, might most likely have access to a Focus Sash as well. So if Andy goes ahead and allows that Crobat to set up that Tailwind and then knocks it out for Yusei, that's going to be a really great opportunity for him to get that Xerneas, if he has it, out on the field fairly unpunished, Geomancy, and then sort of take things from there. Andy doesn't have the opportunity, as far as we know, to match in terms of speed control. I think we've seen all the moves that this Tapu Koko has to offer. So I think Andy's only hope here is, maybe try and get some big damage down onto that Necrozma rather than the Crobat.
Well, we were talking about Dawn Wings, Necrozma, and forget about that. Forget what you heard. That was all a myth, as the Necrozma does Ultra Burst immediately, turning into the Ultra Necrozma. This Tapu Koko's Dazzling Gleam is going to be a whole lot better, though.
It will. It's going to deal some super effective damage. Not a lot, obviously, because we don't have that Fairy Aura active on the field yet. There is no Xerneas. But it also will have the benefit of breaking this Crobat's Focus Sash. So assuming this Kyogre can and will connect attacks this turn, that could be just a great opening again for Yusei.
Oh, Kyogre does reveal the Ice Beam. Didn't show it against the Amoonguss last time. And landing on that Necrozma doesn't quite get there.
He just missed it.
It's not enough. Here's the big turn, though. I mean, Andy, we saw, of course, the previous game, he was just Origin Pulsing. You can't. Now that Necrozma has changed types, you got to look for these moves. And Dazzling Gleam, Ice Beam are the two beams you want to be hitting it with. We just see how strong it is, being able to take those attacks, and now it's in a Tailwind. The Tailwind's going to be so important this turn. We'll see, of course, if the Crobat does anything on top of its usual kind of setup Tailwind and leave. We don't see Crobat all the time. It's a very offensive Pokemon. The Japanese representatives don't always lean into it. So I'll be curious to see if there's a little trick in there and see if that gets revealed. The rain does leave the field, though. And we'll see exactly what this Ultra Necrozma can do. We've not seen as much of it as people thought. The Sludge Bomb connects on this Tapu Koko. The Friend Guard is going to be important. Poison coming through on Tapu Koko, so it's now on a timer anyway. And here it is, one of those big Z moves from a really big Pokemon. Look how big it is. You can't even see past its feet. This is one of those moves that as soon as the rule set was announced literally a year ago, people were talking about it, and Yusei Matsuno is showing it off here at the World Championships in Washington, D.C.
It is the light that burns the sky, so you better put on your sunglasses and get ready for some big damage here. This is Ultra Necrozma's signature move, and like you were saying, it is big, it is very offensive, it is very powerful, and even though this Clefairy is going to have the benefit of, I'm assuming, Eviolite to sort of raise its bulk, that was the most common item run on it, in previous formats. It's going to be tough to say whether it can withstand such a terrifying attack, and it just barely is able to hold on.
Brave Clefairy, you managed to hold on. The Volt Switch will retaliate, though, from the Tapu Koko, taking out that Crobat. The Tailwind is still up. Of course, you know, a good turn essentially there from Andy to see a Clefairy, one of those small Pokemon, take on an Ultra Necrozma and take the hit is absolutely fantastic, and that's so much better than something like that Kyogre, which was in, taking that hit for him. Of course, this Ultra Necrozma is very low on health. Rayquaza maybe looking to pick that one up nice and easily.
And it's perfect that the Ultra Necrozma has already, you know, Ultra Burst, because it lost that Ghost typing that it had when it was in its Dawn Wings form. And as a result, you know, Extreme Speed will be able to connect with that Rayquaza. But Andy has to look at, you know, what the potential outcome of this turn is, because yes, he can go for the KO onto that Ultra Necrozma, but then the Xerneas is going to be able to, you know, maybe go for a Geomancy or maybe just flat out attack this Rayquaza.
Yep.
You know, Clefairy can go for something like a Follow Me to try and protect it, but if that's the case and Xerneas goes for the Geomancy, the next turn we're going to be in a very similar situation. So
Yeah,
it's a lot of damage on the field very early on in the game, and even though Yusei, you know, has taken so much damage onto this Necrozma, I think Necrozma did its job, and it's really, you know, time for the Xerneas now to come in and clean up.
Yeah, you've got one big damage dealer starting off the game and then a follow-up one to tidy up. The big thing right here as well is if Yusei does get the Geomancy up, there's no way to match that speed through something like a Tailwind on Andy's side. He does look a little bit concerned by what he's seeing here, so I think he's made a big play trying to push this one through. Clefairy does have options to try and make this Rayquaza much more threatening than it has been in the past. We'll see exactly what goes through. Necrozma starting out with the Photon Geyser.
No Extreme Speed.
Yeah, no Extreme Speeds this turn. Clefairy just taken out of play. We didn't see anything out of the Clefairy immediately, so we'll see how that one goes. Xerneas' Dazzling Gleam is now single target. Please bear that in mind, as it's going to not get the Rayquaza
take it
and activate it's a berry. We are going to see one of those pinch berries. It's low, it's definitely in a pinch, and the Aguave Berry healing it up there as Swords Dance comes through. So now those Extreme Speeds are more powerful. The Dragon Ascents are more powerful. And at the moment, Yusei has another turn, right, where he could set up something, you know, where he will be going first, but as soon as that Tailwind ends, if Xerneas doesn't have Geomancy, it's definitely in trouble a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's such a, you know, interesting sort of adjustment from Andy coming into this tournament. I think a lot of people, you know, as they prepared for the World Championships, were thinking about this new kind of Mega Rayquaza. You know, it's a bit bulkier. It does carry one of those pinch berries to heal back its health, and it's, you know, purposely trained in a way that allows it to take something like a Dazzling Gleam in this exact situation. So if that, you know, this was exactly, I think, what Andy was hoping to get out of that turn. Yes, the Clefairy gets knocked out, but the Tapu Koko gets to come in for free, doesn't take any poison chip damage, has the opportunity to stall out the remainder of this Tailwind, but you know, this Metagross is at full health and certainly is going to threaten down these Pokemon as well. So just a very tough spot for Andy to be in, and hopefully the Swords Dance gets him enough momentum to sort of find a way out.
Oh no, so Yusei there does try and Dazzling Gleam, doesn't call the Protect from Rayquaza, wants to just make sure he knocks it out. But the big thing right now, of course, is that Tailwind is going to expire. And as soon as that Tailwind expires, now this Rayquaza is the threat. He is the ultimate threat on this team. Of course, Tapu Koko in an interesting position, hasn't used the Z move yet, so could go after something like the Metagross. You know, a little bit harder when the Kyogre's not in play, you know, to Thunder on its own. But, you know, it's always a good move to have, and the Z move doesn't have to worry about the usual thoughts of Thunder. So if Tapu Koko wants to do damage, then it is going to be a consideration of just that Z move. Metagross isn't going to appreciate that, and right now this Rayquaza is going to cause Yusei Matsuno a whole lot of problems. Yusei not Geomancying there, the strategy that won him game one is going to be very tough.
It's going to come down to whether or not these trainers can predict which Pokemon is going to protect and which Pokemon that Andy's going to target down with that Z move. I think that the Gigavolt Havoc should be able to get a knockout on, you know, either of these Pokemon, and if Andy predicted correctly and went for something like the Gigavolt Havoc onto the Metagross, and assuming it's even able to do so, because Bullet Punch will be a priority move and knock it out, you know, it's a tough spot. And unfortunately for Andy, you know, he just sort of played exactly into Yusei's hand there, targeting the Xerneas, which protected with a Dragon Ascent.
This is one of the kind of, I don't want to say downfalls, but one of those issues that people have with these hyper-offensive teams. Like, yes, your Rayquaza is really, really ready to go, right? You're powered up, you've got the Swords Dance, you want to be dealing those big amounts of damage, but as soon as you run into a well-timed Protect, you're just going to fall short. I still do think Andy's in a really great position right now. There's no tailwind on Yusei's side. He is in a good position to just try and knock out this Xerneas with the Dragon Ascent and then fire back, follow up with the Kyogre and then just take out that Metagross kind of one-on-one. As soon as you get rid of the Xerneas, you are going to be in a great position to try and deal more damage to Metagross. Origin Pulse, Water Spout becoming a single target.
But there's also, that Ultra Necrozma in the back as well. So really, it's going to have to be this turn if Kyogre's able to knock out the Metagross with the single target attack.
Yeah, it's got to be done, right? Like, you've got to deal with that right now. We'll see what Metagross can do in retaliation as well. We do, of course, know there was the earlier Thunder Punch that we saw. Could be interesting to see how that goes. The options are a little limited. There's
no terrain to boost it as well.
There's no terrain, but I mean, you're still going to be doing a whole lot of damage, right? Like, it's nothing to be sniffed at when Metagross can really put the pressure down.
I like how Yusei switched out the Xerneas here, though. I mean, it didn't have Geomancy up already, so really there's no punishment for doing so. And this Ultra Necrozma, yes, it's going to be knocked out, but maybe he's hoping that the Metagross is able to find an opening.
Yeah, so here's what's going to create that opening is the downside of Dragon Ascent. It does a huge amount of damage. If Kyogre can't get the knockout on this Metagross, maybe Metagross is going to take advantage of those defense drops and then push on. Thunder Punch is the choice, is heading towards this Kyogre, and even without the terrain, it's going to be enough. So Andy is now the one, even though his Rayquaza is powered up, in the 2v1 situation.
Yeah, and this is why I love Mega Metagross as a Mega Pokemon. It's honestly one of my favorites. Tough Claws is just such an amazing ability. You really need something like an Intimidate to slow it down, and unfortunately for Andy, I don't think this matchup sort of gave him the room to bring that Incineroar as much as he wanted to.
No, I mean, this Metagross as well, you want to bring the Incineroar for that, but it does carry, like, Stomping Tantrum, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And here's the thing, like, the Metagross has just provided so much for Yusei. Even though it went down in this game, I think it showed off a little bit better. Andy knows that that's the one he's got to deal with. He's going to Dragon Ascent into the Steel type. It's not very effective. And Yusei, really smart in both games to take a huge amount of offensive pressure and just handle it, deal with it, and fire back immediately. We did see Flash across the